Hello there. Welcome back. Oh, today is going to be rough. I have a lot to explain, and it's not going to be easy. I'm going to do my best. I always do my best, but I'm going to have to give it 110%. Tradition. Tradition can cause issues. I mentioned tradition with eternal torment. That is tradition. It's wrong, but it's tradition. Human free will. That's tradition. It's wrong, but that's what's taught. Unfortunately, I try to show how it doesn't add up in a nice way, if I can. The Dais of Christ, or the judgment seat of Christ. Tradition. Not the thing in itself, but the placement. It is usually placed in the future. This is the traditional view. I think it started pretty early on, actually, maybe 3rd century. Incorrect, but it is tradition. So I'm always going against tradition, because tradition is usually wrong. Now, in my last video, I showed that believers can be judged. If you have seen the wonderful truth of the salvation of all, the eventual salvation of all, and someone may come up to you and say, well, if we're all saved and there's nothing that can stop that. And by the way, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you cannot lose your salvation. You cannot lose your salvation. But someone could approach you and say, well, if we're going to be saved anyways, then we can do what we want. Now, you don't need me to tell you that doing whatever you want is dangerous and not very smart. But as far as Christ is concerned, we are separated from the world. We are not condemned with the world. And because we are separated from the world, our Lord has every right to discipline us. I brought up Hebrews chapter 12 last time, and 1 Corinthians chapter 11. A rare and extreme instance of judgment from the Lord. Tradition. So for the Dais of Christ, or the judgment seat of Christ, it's always placed in the future. And I used to believe that it was a future event. I couldn't properly explain it, though. So when I first looked at it, I thought that it was a raised platform for rewards, for service, for good service for God. To do something good, you get rewarded. I came into a realization that this conflicts with the nature of Paul's gospel, which is transcendent grace. That if it begins in grace, it has to end in grace. So let's take the Corinthians that died in chapter 11 of 1 Corinthians. I believe fully that they will have every spiritual blessing among the celestials, just like me and just like you. Just because they did wrong and they were disciplined for it doesn't mean that they've lost anything. If that's the case, then we need to adjust our gospel. That's not transcendent grace anymore. It's just, really, it's Israel's gospel, just sort of augmented. So I've come to the realization that the Dais has to be present in order to make any sense at all. I cannot reconcile a future judgment seat of Christ in immortality. For someone to be immortal that means that you are perfect. All of your actions have been made perfect by the cross of Christ. From the moment that we see him, from the moment that we see him, we will be perfect, and all of our actions will be perfect. Through him only. They will be justified. So to take perfected believers, perfected immortal human beings, which are the crown jewel of Christ's accomplishment, and to take them to a condemnation of sorts as the first thing that's done, I cannot accept that. And I actually have a boatload of proof now. I've had much time to look over these things, and the Dais is present. Now, I mentioned 2 verses from last time in Ephesians and Colossians. The reason I mention these 2 verses is because they are always linked with the Dais of Christ. One is in Ephesians chapter 6, the other is in Colossians chapter 3. So let's go over Ephesians 6 first. They are parallel verses. It has to do with masters and slaves. So in verse 5 of Ephesians 6, it says, "Slaves, be obeying your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in the singleness of your heart as to Christ, not with eye slavery, as man-pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the soul, with good humor slaving as to the Lord and not to men, being aware that whatsoever good each one should be doing, for this he will be requited by the Lord, whether slave or free." The word "for" is not in the Greek. Now, we have to change some of the terminology to conform with English idiom. A literal rendering of this would be being aware that whatever good each one should be doing, this he will be requited by the Lord, whether slave or free. Keep that in mind, okay? That the word "for" is not there. So he will be requited by the Lord, will be given back, whether slave or free. And masters be doing the same toward them, being lax and threatening, being aware that their master, as well as yours, is in the heavens, and there is no partiality with him. This verse usually doesn't cause much of a stir. Now, it seems that you do good things, and according to our traditional view, in the future you will get good things back. But if you take away that one word "for," it would imply that you get back the exact same things that you did. Just keep that in your mind for the moment, because when you go to the parallel verse in Colossians 3, you have some very difficult issues. Verse 22 of Colossians 3. "Slaves, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye slavery as man-pleasers, but with singleness of heart, fearing the Lord. All, whatsoever you may be doing, work from the soul, as to the Lord and not to men, being aware that from the Lord you will be getting the compensation of the enjoyment of an allotment. For the Lord Christ are you slaving." And here it is. Remember, I said that the word "for" is not in Ephesians. Well, it's the same in this verse. "He who is injuring shall be requited for that which he injures, and there is no partiality." I'm going to read it without the word in it. "He who is injuring shall be requited that which he injures, will be paid back that which he injures, and there is no partiality." So the 2 verses are parallels. One is good, one is bad. Take away the word "for," and you get a tit for tat type deal. Now, this is supposed to be a future judgment of perfected beings. So this means that, now I'm just taking away this word that conforms with English idiom for a dramatic effect. I don't think there's anything wrong with the translation. But if you take the Dais as a future event, would it not be absurd to say that you receive back the exact same thing that you did? And you can go over all the scenarios in your mind. A very smart man told me once that I can't remember the exact conversation, to be honest, but he said, well, what if you killed somebody? God forbid you killed somebody, and you're at the dais. Is God going to kill you? You are immortal after all. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? Okay, so we know that those terms being requited in Ephesians and Colossians, what it is you're getting back what is due for what you have done. So the things that are due for the things that are done. There's nothing wrong with the translations. I'm just trying to make a point to lead up to 2 Corinthians 5. And boy, could I talk about 2 Corinthians 5 for 2 hours, but I can't. The first part of 2 Corinthians is usually misinterpreted. I've actually gone over this, I think. Although I've been doing this for over a month now, so my memory fails me in this. But in the first 9 verses, there's a phrase that's used in churches: to be absent from the body is to be with the Lord. I heard this many, many times. Now that is, unfortunately, a misrepresentation of what the text actually says. My literal version, the concordant literal, does a very good job of translating that. Because the dais of Christ is the first mention in the scriptures, which is odd. If there was a dais, like a literal judging after resurrection, I would expect to see it in the gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I see nothing of a judgment for resurrected Israelites in the gospel accounts. I would not expect to go to the Evangel of Grace, transcendent grace, to find a judgment of condemnation. But that's besides what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to skim through the first 9 verses, and we'll go over the correction real quick. It's in verse 10 that the dais is mentioned for the first time. Now remember, these are the Corinthians. The Corinthians were idiots. They were constantly misbehaving. Their conduct was horrible. They were rowdy, okay? They were a rowdy group. And I'm so tempted to go over this passage again and explain it, because I'm probably partially autistic, but I can't do it. Verse 1, 2 Corinthians 5. Paul is just talking about the frame that we're in now, the frame I'm in right now that's freezing to death out here, and the frame that we will have when Christ returns. He's just contrasting the two. And the reason I have to read these is because he mentions the body. In verse 10, the body is mentioned. This will lead to context, which will help my point. So verse 1, for we are aware that if our terrestrial tabernacle house, like a flimsy tent, should be demolished, we have a building of God, a house not made by hands. A building is much stronger than a tent. This is immortality. Aeonian in the heavens. For in this also we are groaning, longing to be dressed in our habitation which is out of heaven. Immortality. Give it to us now, we want it. If so be that being dressed also we shall not be found naked. That's a figure for death. For we also, who are in the tabernacle, the tent, are groaning, being burdened, on which we are not wanting to be stripped, but to be dressed, that the mortal may be swallowed up by life. And we don't want to hurt anymore. Now he who produces us for the same longing is God, who is also giving us the earnest of the Spirit, the down payment. That's God's seal on you. As I said, you cannot lose your salvation. I think I said that already. If I haven't, you cannot lose your salvation. It's grace. And you can't lose anything else. Being then courageous also, and aware that being at home in the body. Please remember verse 6, being at home in the body. Body, the word body is equated to mortality. Being at home in the body, we are away from home from the Lord. So being at home in the body, mortality, we are away from home from the Lord. I know Paul's wording isn't the easiest to understand. We are not immortal. So Paul is focused on mortality here. For by faith are we walking, not by perception. Yet we are encouraged and are delighted rather to be away from home, out of the body. Now this is not some odd thing where you exit your body and you're like floating around or something. He's just making a point. We do not want to be mortal. Sorry, it sounded funny the way I said it. Mortal. A little emphasis on the T. Mortal. We don't want to be mortal. Might as well go all the way with that. Yes, we don't want to be mortal. Where was I at? Yet we are encouraged and are delighting rather to be away from home, out of the body. Mortality. That's in verse 8. So we got verses 6 and verses 8. The body is equated to mortality. And to be at home with the Lord. Wherefore we are ambitious also, whether at home or away from home. So whether we're mortal or immortal. That didn't make any sense. Mortal. Did I say that? Did I say mortal or immortal? I'm not redoing this, so you're just going to have to take it how it is. Whether we're mortal or immortal. Mortal or immortal. To be well-pleasing to him. Verse 10, here it is. Now this is how my literal translation and almost every other translation deals with this passage. For all of us must be manifested in front of the dais of Christ, that each should be requited or paid back for that which he puts into practice through the body, whether good or bad. Now remember those passages that we read, Ephesians and Colossians, and I took away the word for, to be paid back the exact thing that you did. Now this says whether good or bad. That's pretty vague, isn't it? One of the first things I noticed when I started studying the Dais of Christ was that it was extremely vague. For something so important, I would think that Paul would be very, very clear. If you go through verses 1 through 9, this is one of the most complicated passages that you can read. Like I said, the church has used that phrase, to be absent from the body is to be with the Lord. Paul can be hard to understand. Now we know that when you die, that you're gone, you cease to exist. That term seems to contradict that. So the chapter itself is already a bit difficult and it's misrepresented. For verse 10 to be completely clear, it's an assumption. All right, here's what I'm going to do. Let me read it one more time, and this is my concordant literal. For all of us must be manifested in front of the dais of Christ, that each should be requited for that which he puts into practice through the body, whether good or bad. Just remember what I said about taking away the word for. Okay, I need to switch over to my little, you'll see.
Okay, as you can notice by my voice, this is no longer Aaron speaking. This is Bob, Aaron's guardian angel. Aaron asked me to do this part of the video because he thought it would put things into perspective for the audience. You see, celestial beings are extremely curious about the future rulers of the universe and their complete equality amongst each other in the body of Christ. Aaron is all about some equality. Paul's gospel is 100% grace, and a gospel full of grace must be equal for every believer. Also, Aaron wants to highlight the importance of conduct in regards to believers. Conduct is extremely important. So, having said that, let's take a look at some of the Greek text from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. We're going to go over the structure slowly and methodically. We will leave no stone unturned. Aaron and I have studied this passage night and day to present the glorious truth of a present judgment seat of Christ. Now, let's get into it.
In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, there is what you have before you called a subordinate clause. The clause begins just after the Apostle Paul mentions that believers must be manifested before the judgment seat of Christ. Inside of this clause are two prepositional phrases, sandwiched in between two transitive verbs. These prepositional phrases and transitive verbs are crucial for understanding Paul's meaning. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you with a ton of information. I want to keep this as simple as possible. Take a look at the two red arrows on the page. These are the definite article and the relative pronoun. Easy so far, right? Now, I'm going to circle the two verbs for emphasis. Highlighting can clear away a lot of the noise from the passage and help us see the clear truth. So here's what translators do. They see that the definite article and the relative pronoun are the same case, number, and gender. This usually means that they are connected, that the pronoun goes backward in the sentence and modifies the definite article in some manner. This is where the mistake is made. While common grammar usually denotes a connection, context demands that the article and pronoun be separated along with their corresponding prepositional phrases. So the first prepositional phrase, in or through the body, should be paired specifically to the verb translated may receive back. The second prepositional phrase, according to what, should be paired with the verb translated he did. The reason for the decoupling of these phrases should be obvious to those who know Greek. You see, when a definite article is placed before a prepositional phrase, it changes the entire phrase into a nominalized substantival. That's just a fancy way of saying that it changes the entire phrase into a noun. As a noun in the accusative case, the phrase in or through the body can only be linked to the transitive verb preceding it. The transitive verb needs a noun to place the action onto. Our substantivized phrase with the article gives the verb exactly what it needs. The substantive phrase can now be the channel of the action from the preceding verb. The things that are received back, the recompense, is now done through the body. The body is now the center of attention in the verse. Realizing that the substantive phrase has to relate solely to the preceding verb, we can look at the relative pronoun and its prepositional phrase and link them together in an adverbial function. The what of the relative pronoun now shows the limits of the verb he did. These are the things that the individual did that need to be addressed by Christ. So we have a definite article acting as a noun, taking on the action of the preceding verb. We have a relative pronoun inside of a prepositional phrase that is acting adverbially to limit the extent of the action in the second verb. This ensures that both of the things that we do in the body and the things that we receive in response to them, are separated. Coupling these phrases together essentially does what Aaron was warning about in the verses he read in Ephesians and Colossians. It makes the things that we do the exact same thing that we receive back. Translators know that coupling the phrases together gives it this redundant and nonsensical meaning, but must keep them together in order to make the Bema of Christ a future event. If they were to separate the phrases, as they should, the Bema would turn into a current event that is done through the mortality of the body.
Okay,
Let's just take a step back and try to analyze all of the complex things we went over. I know that I didn't spend much time on the actual Greek text. This was intentional because the point of the matter is actually quite obvious when you look at translations side by side. I did, however, need to show that there is grammatical precedence for alternative translations of this well-known verse. Even if you didn't catch what I was conveying with the prepositional phrases, it's okay. You will still see what Aaron was telling you at the beginning, that the mortal body of the believer is the center of what Paul was discussing in the first 9 verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Now, in looking at these two translations, we get a glimpse at some of the trouble that translators have had with this passage. One translation, Young's Literal, clearly has the phrase, the things, mentioned twice. This is what Aaron and I are attempting to point out with the relative pronoun and the definite article. They can both be translated as the things. Now, if you don't turn the first prepositional phrase into a noun, as I showed with the article, both of the things in the sentence become the exact same thing. The second translation on the screen is closer to the original meaning of the text. If Smith's literal translation changed the words for the body into through the body, it would convey precisely what Aaron was going over. Since the first prepositional phrase, through the body, becomes a noun through the agent of the definite article, it becomes the channel of the action, and not just some second thought. It is the core attribute of the judgment seat of Christ. Just as the Corinthians were judged for partaking of the Lord's dinner unworthily through their bodies, we also are judged through our bodies for the good or bad that we do. So, to end this video, let's look at a translation that strikes at the heart of the matter. Here we have the Aramaic Bible in plain English. This particular translation is very direct. It says that the judging is done in the body. This is the same body that Paul mentioned in verses 6 and 8 in the same chapter of 2 Corinthians, just before he brings in the judgment seat of Christ. The translator obviously saw the article before the prepositional phrase in the accusative case and surmised that the transitive verb, which is translated as receive back, should be linked with the definite article alone. The translators of this version must have seen that the relative pronoun in the second prepositional clause was linked to the second verb, serving in an adverbial manner. This changes the judgment seat of Christ from a distant future event into a present ongoing evaluation by the Lord. In no way can this passage be translated in a future sense without making the things done in the body the exact same things that are received at the judgment seat of Christ. As Aaron said, it would be useless to imagine all of the incredible scenarios that would ensue if the judgment seat was future, and that what was dished out was the same that the person put into effect while mortal. In summary, Aaron and I hope that this introduction to the structure of the verse and the variance in translations helps you to see the judgment seat as a present reality. Hopefully this will assist you in your day-to-day life, knowing that Christ is molding you in a manner that will give God the most glory. Thank you for listening, and please leave a comment if you would like a further explanation concerning this matter. Aaron won't let me answer questions yet due to my over-explaining of topics. He finds it redundant, much like the redundancy we see in the traditional translations of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. But maybe, just maybe, he will give me control of the comment section one day. Okay, have a blessed day, and remember that conduct matters even if you can't lose salvation or anything else.